Hey guys, I am Game Advisor and welcome back to another Super People video. Today we're going to be talking about the Strike Force class, how all their talents work, what they do, and how you actually should be playing them in the game. So with that being said, let's just jump right on into it. Now, the first ability I want to talk about is their Airwalk ability. Airwalk is basically just something you can do in the game if you didn't already know, where you'll spam spacebar in order to kind of hover in the air a little bit whenever you're jumping a long distance. This can allow you to get over gaps significantly easier instead of having to climb, as well as jump from rooftop to rooftop and many other different situations. The Airwalk talent in particular, though, for Strike Force is going to do a few different things. At level 1, this will give you a longer lasting airwalk so you can go a little bit further with it. You will also no longer take damage whenever you fall from high locations. At level 2, you'll be able to get some increased jump shot accuracy, and HP will also not decrease even whenever you're falling from high locations, which again is something we've already said, but I'm not really sure here what the difference is. I'm pretty sure it just means now you can take a 0 damage. You won't take any damage in any way, shape, or form whenever you fall from a high location, no matter how high that location is. Again, I could be wrong on this one, so feel free to correct me down in the comments. Now, level 3 of the perk is going to increase the airwalk effect even further, increase your jump speed, so the rate at which you get to the height of your jump and the total height of your jump, as well as improving your crosshair while you're jumping and shooting. What this means for the Strike Force class is that it makes it much easier for you to jump over walls and engage your opponents. You no longer will have to go ahead and do that climbing animation and will instead be able to immediately get over and start shooting down on your enemy. This also makes it so that you are a much harder target to hit, as a target that has vertical and horizontal movement becomes significantly harder to hit for enemies than somebody who is only horizontal, meaning they're not jumping up high into the air as well as moving to the side at the same time. Now, their next ability is going to be called Tactical Slide. Tactical Slide is very straightforward. You'll either get 3, 5, or 7% move speed based on the level of the talent, as well as get the ability to hold C whenever you're sprinting in order to kind of go into this little tactical slide animation. I'm going to be honest with you, it's pretty useless. There is very few niche situations where it can be useful, but for the most part, you're better off just leaning and quickly going around corners. The key thing you can do with this is you can slide and turn and shoot at the exact same moment in time. This means you can be moving one direction while shooting another. But since strafing exists, it really doesn't matter that much. I'm just going to be honest with you again and just say this is a talent that is basically worthless outside of the extra move speed you get. Next up is Shoot and Run. Shoot and Run will grant you a 30, 60, or 120% movement speed increase whenever you are shoulder aiming, which means aiming in third person, and aiming down the sights. This means that you'll be able to move significantly faster while also putting rounds accurately on your opponent. This is going to pair very well with our next talent, which is called Assault. Assault is very straightforward as well. It's going to give you a 5, 10, or 15% damage and defense increase based on how fast you're moving and what level of the talent you have. If we pair this with our Shoot and Run talent, that means that we'll be able to go ahead and move horizontally while putting rounds on target, increasing our damage and making us harder to hit all at the same time. We can also pair this with our ultimate to get even more damage by moving faster to get that extra damage boost. In total, it can add up to something like 10 to 15 extra damage per shot, which is a huge amount when you're using a submachine gun. Moving upwards to our next defense talent, we have Long Range Defense. Long Range Defense will give you a negative 10, 15, or 20% damage taken from enemies whenever you're at a distance of over 120 meters or more. This class is going to be a super high mobility, closing the gap, getting in close and personal with our opponents kind of a class, so we'll want to have some protection from those long range engagements. If we do get stuck in one and have no way to close the gap because our ultimate's on cooldown or there's no cover to move between, we can quickly die. Therefore, this will help you to stay alive a little bit easier in those situations. Next up is Bulletproof Shield. This is another very straightforward talent that is basically just going to immediately create a bulletproof shield that will absorb a little bit of damage in order to keep you safe if you happen to get caught out in the open and need cover. This does have a health pool though, and it will go up and the cooldown will get reduced as you level up this skill, getting it all the way down to a 60-second cooldown and increasing its total HP by 100. This thing doesn't have a ton of health even with that case, so just use it very cautiously as it can break with just a few shells going into it. Following that, we have our main weapon damage increase, which is the same for every single class. It's just going to be whatever weapons over here in this little box to the right is going to be your damage increase. By default, Strikeforce will have all the SMGs that can spawn in this slot, so you should have quite a few options. Again, we're up close and personal, so we want close range weapons like this whenever we're using this class. Following that is going to be Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire is again very straightforward, but also very impactful. It's going to increase your SMG fire rate by 5, 7, or 10%, as well as the magazine capacity by that same amount. This means that when you do get to level 3 in the Rapid Fire talent, you'll be able to put a total of 10% more damage downrange into your opponent within roughly about the same amount of time. Again, our magazine is moving up with our SMG capacity, and this does stack with an extended mag, so do keep that in mind. Now, our last talent before we move into the ultimate will be Lacerating rounds. Lacerating rounds will apply a bleed effect that is 1, 2, or 3 seconds long based on the level of the talent you currently have. The way this works is your opponent will take 1 damage per second they have the debuff, and they're only allowed to have 2 different lacerating debuffs at any given time. So if you have a very high rate SMG at close range, this is basically only going to add maybe 2 to 5 damage onto your target before they're already dead. Again, not very impactful, but hey, it's a little bit of extra damage, and it does go through armor, so if you do get in a long range situation, at least you have some extra damage to help you out there. Now, the last thing I want to cover is your ultimate. Your ultimate is going to be incredibly powerful as Strikeforce. All of our talents are really focused around getting us into close range and giving us a lot of survivability if we get caught out in a long range situation. What your ultimate is going to do is give you a 200% increased movement speed buff for 5 seconds once every 70 seconds, which is a very short cooldown timer. This means you can close gaps incredibly quickly and get on top of your opponent and start pumping damage into them. You see a sniper, oh no, he's on a hill far away. Well, guess what? You can pop a speed bar and go ahead and use your ultimate, and you'll be running about 250% faster than you would have been if you were level 1 or any other normal person would be. This will allow you to close that gap so fast that a lot of snipers just won't be able to hit you if you just swerve a lot. You can also quickly go around a structure and get somebody from behind that didn't think you could get around the structure that quickly. This is a very, very impactful talent and really helps us to focus in on that gap closing, high damage, super close range combat style. Before we move into talking about how you should be playing the class in an actual game, I do want to quickly mention that whenever you're using your ultimate, you can go ahead and jump at the end of its effect in order to get extra distance while also moving at a very high rate of speed when you normally would not be able to because your ultimate would be gone. You just need to time it right, and it can really dramatically impact how much distance you can cover within that 5-second time period. Now let's talk about how you should be using the class within an actual game. At the beginning, Strikeforce is not in particularly strong. Your goal will be to get your ultimate as fast as possible and try to find an SMG, and if you can, find an SMG that is specifically the one you have in the top left corner. All this damage will give you a huge increase whenever you're up close and personal, even if you don't like the weapon, whether it's an Uzi, a Vector, an UMP, an MP5, or any other SMG, you want to take whichever one it's telling you that you should be taking for that extra 20% damage increase. I do recommend for your second weapon that you either take a fast firing rate long range weapon like an M4, or you go ahead and take another SMG just in case you run out of ammunition when you're in close combat because you missed too many of your shots. I do tend to go towards more of the assault rifle weapons simply because they give you that long range capability if you get forced into a long range fight, which again, we don't want to have. Next, we'll want to make sure that we are always in an area where we can close the gap and have lots of cover. We do not do well out in the open because we are basically a sitting duck with no long range advantages. Yes, we have the shield talent, and yes, we have our long range defense talent, but it's not going to be enough to help you win against an AR that's over 100 meters away. This means we'll want to land in suburb areas, we'll want to land in places where there are a lot of buildings to loot, so we don't have to go run out to big farms where there's lots of open fields in order to get geared up. If we do get into an engagement, it's really important that we always activate our ultimate if we're shocked in order to get away from the opponent and find cover, or immediately start to swerve so the opponent cannot land shots on you easily. At close range with your ultimate going, even if you get surprised by somebody around a corner, if you just swerve to the right or swerve to the left, a lot of people are not able to turn their camera fast enough and keep shots on you accurately. You can also just hit spacebar with your ultimate in order to get a huge vertical jump, making you an even harder target to hit in those panic moment situations. Now, if we know where our opponent's at, we want to make sure that we use our ultimate and quickly show up behind them when they're not aware. If they are aware of us, we'll want to try to draw their attention to one side and then quickly ultimate and either jump over that area they're looking at so that they don't see us above them, or we'll want to go ahead and ultimate and run around the opposite side of whatever they're using for cover. Again, there are a ton of different situations and I can't cover all of them. You'll just have to play the game in order to get used to the class and really understand it. But another thing I can give you a tip on is the fact that you're able to stay on top of houses very easily. Given your ultimate gives you high jump height and you have a talent that grants you jump height, you'll be able to get up onto roofs and then drop down onto your opponents whenever they open the door to go to the next building or whenever they have to move because of the circle. Again, we are high mobility. Let's use that mobility. We don't want long range fights. We always want close range ones. Whenever we're running from the circle, if we have to, don't be afraid to ultimate, as again, it's only a 70-second cooldown. You can ult, run for the 5 seconds, and then right before your ult ends, jump, and it'll almost always get you far enough away from the circle so that you don't take any more damage for the rest of the distance you have to run. Now, there is a lot more to learn with this class, but this should get you started, and I will say if you're in third-person mode, do not be afraid to use third-person aim at close range. It will give you an advantage because you can focus more about moving and dodging your opponent than you are about keeping your aim on target. If you're in first-person mode, this won't really be an option for you. You can still do it, just going to be a lot harder to keep your crosshair on target. One quick bonus tip for you, be very careful of the Shotgun Master class, as that is the one class that can one-shot you at point-blank range at max level with tier 5 armor. It is the only thing we really need to be afraid of in close range combat, but otherwise you should be able to win most of your fights as long as you can get into those close range situations. Now, I do want to give a quick shout out to all of our channel members, which include Caustic FPV, Jonathan S, and Jim Phillips. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I'm Game Advisor, and I'll see you next time.